so that they know when they're frustrated. This is part of it. You being frustrated is a physical manifestation of your ability to learn. Your frustration is you expanding your, in education, they call it your zone of proximal development, the zone of the things that you're capable of. And you're growing that zone with each moment of frustration that you pull. I just tell people, I don't care how frustrated you are. I'm going to force you to continue to fail until you've failed enough that you recognize that failure is an inherent part of the process. And then by doing that, you can release yourself of the stress and anxiety of failure because you know, I'm going to fail.
This is part of it.
Yeah. And I've been successful enough for long enough that I can be like, this is not a accurate depiction of my skill and ability. It's just part of my process in getting better.
Hi, Ted. How are you doing? I'm so grateful. I'm so thankful and happy that you have agreed to have a conversation with me about your creativity and the way that you express that in the world. Thanks for being open to being interviewed by me.
Of course, yeah. I'm happy to be here. Happy to help.
So Ted and I have been friends for a while. For how long now?
I think we met in 2016 because I think it was that summer.
And when I met you, you were doing something very different than that you are now. But what I wanted to say is that you bake bread. That's not the only thing you do. You do other things too.
Yeah.
But you do bake bread, right?
I'd say most of my day is spent breading. But aside from that, I do have a couple other hobbies, yes.
Cool. So then I'm just going to dive right in and ask you, what first drew you to the craft of baking bread?
I think that I was mostly inspired by a particular person, to be honest. I watched a Netflix documentary called Cooked by Michael Pollan, and he's an incredible researcher, and his topic is mostly food. And so in this documentary, he talked about all these different ways that people cook food, and one of the specials was on bread. And at that time, I had sort of that plus some other stuff had gotten me into making bread just on the side when I was, in leisure time. And so when the confluence of events that occurred that allowed me to switch careers, I was like really into bread at that moment. And I think it just sort of snowballed into a career.
Oh, I remember Michael Pollan he's obviously very popular. And what was the name of there was Omnivore's Dilemma, right?
That was the book. That's like
that was the book.
Big book. He had a couple other ones. Food Rules, which is a really big one for me. But the Netflix documentary was called Cooked.
Cooked.
Yeah.
Got it.
And it followed the 4 elements: fire, water, earth, and air. And the air one was about bread mostly.
Oh, so cool. So what about air made it about bread?
Bread is essentially the manipulation and containment of air, right? So like when something is leavened by yeast, you're just trapping air bubbles inside of dough balls. And I think that plus like the fact that you bake it in an oven and that's like, heated air essentially. Obviously, he's like an incredible documentarian and makes like incredible stuff. So
when you came across this book, what were you doing?
I came across the Netflix documentary first.
Oh, yeah, the documentary.
Originally. I was working in education and religious education, and I was not a like super gung-ho about it in the moment. And I sort of started to realize that like my favorite part of that job was when I would like make 500 latkes, and they were like shitty latkes that you would throw in an oven that like were of who knows what origin, but that like I felt really good doing something like that in a job where I was supposed to be focusing on like developing emotional safety and creativity and all this other stuff. But like the thing that I really liked was serving the pizza and latkes at Hanukkah or whatever.
That's cool.
Yeah. And so when the opportunity to sort of like jump ship or, change careers and do something a little bit different, I was really into bread and I was really into feeding people. And so it just sort of led me to the craft of bread as a
So
profession.
talk about so you were at home baking bread, right? You were just,
Yeah, just
what were
doing it
you sharing?
and then like giving it to my neighbors or like friends who live near me.
And you did that for a while, right? Before having this other opportunity, or what was it? How did it come about?
Yeah, so I was baking bread maybe for like 2 or 3 months in my house to like with relative success. The first loaf of bread that I ever made came out really good and it like looked great. And all I needed was like a little bit of success to keep going. But before that, I had gotten into baking years prior to because I was dating a girl who was gluten free, egg free, and dairy free. So I would like bake these cupcakes that were like special with all of her dietary needs. And then I got more into food and sort of like our connection to food and where it comes from and food is fuel and all these different things. And bread just so happened to be the thing in the moment when I needed a thing in the moment. I think it very easily could have been I could have become a butcher. I could have become something else, but bread was really what I needed when I needed it. And um and yeah, it stuck.
It's interesting because one of the questions I was going to ask is like how your connection has deepened over time to
Mhm.
baking bread, but also like what you said about that is it showed up when you needed it. And that's very interesting. And how did that deepen from there?
Well, at first, I think my only goal was to become a baker. And like not just like a dude who made bread, but like there was an identity that I wanted to inhabit. And I couldn't inhabit that until like I wasn't inhabiting it yet, I'll say. And then I started baking and working with people, and it became clear that like you have to do this for years until you really know anything about anything. And so it took me my first goal was just to feel comfortable in a bakery doing all the tasks and being able to shape bread and bake bread and mix and all that kind of stuff efficiently and consistently. And that took years to even get to a place where I would call myself a baker or where I thought I was good enough for someone else to look at me as a baker. Uh, so that was where it started, was just like become a baker and get better and learn the skill. I was like very head down and like not thinking about, am I making things that I'm proud about? Am I making food that I want to eat? Am I whatever? Like I just need to learn the skills of baking. And so that took like maybe 4 or 5 years till I felt really good with what I could do. And it's only been like recently where I've had to think about other things, other like horizons on what a baker could be.
It's like having a trade, like it's a mastering a particular. So I said craft, it's a craft, but then it's also an art, right?
Yeah, for sure. It depends on who you talk to and like
Science and
what
art,
part
it's
of it.
both,
Yeah,
right?
I view it much more like a science.
Like a
Um,
science.
yeah, like maybe this is not the exact thing that you would like to hear, but
No, no, I want to hear it.
I don't really think of myself as a creative. I recognize that I create like very ex nihilo, out of nothing, rare, like really basic ingredients, flour, water, salt, yeast, into like a meaningful, eatable, usable product. So in that way, I create, but like I don't think of myself as like artistically creative.
It's interesting and it's pretty cool that you don't necessarily think of yourself as a creative and yet you do create.
Oh,
And even in the variety, like you're learning about, the nuances of this makes this kind of bread, that kind of bread, that kind of bread from almost the same ingredients, probably adding a few extra other things in or excluding other things out.
mhm.
But yet even that in that the variety of the creativity of all the different iterations of bread that you can create. It's cool that you don't think of yourself as a creative and yet that is like basically what you do every day.
Yeah, I don't know why. I think of it as much more like, and this is not like an either or sort of thing, but like it's much more blue collar than like, I think sometimes when you watch The Bear or you watch Great British Bake Off or whatever, there's like a romanticism to food, especially in the modern age with like the rock star chef and Anthony Bourdain and all the media that like around food stuff. But like in the end, it's a blue collar job. I'm up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm on my feet for 10 plus hours a day. I get 20 minutes for lunch and I don't take all of it because I got to get back to doing the thing I have to do. Um, and I'm sure there are people who are in the exact same position that I'm in who do look at themselves as creatives and they do like enjoy that part of testing things and pushing the limit on this, that, or the other. But for me personally, that's just not how I view myself.
Then what's your relationship to that kind of discipline or that kind of routine and that
Mhm.
kind of doing it every day over and over again? What's your
Mhm.
relationship with that? Because that's part of what it takes to do what you do, right?
Yeah, yeah. I love it. I love that part of it. For so many years, I thought, like I'm sure many young men do, that like chaos is a ladder and you got to climb it. And like, actually, I feel good in chaos and blah, blah. No, none of that was true. I spent like a long time creating chaos in my life that made things way worse. What I really should have been doing is like searching for structure. Now that I'm a little bit older, I recognize how much better I thrive with structure. And so when I think about the monotony or the repetition of doing the same thing every day, which is what you do as a baker, like your life is about consistency. You need to make the same bread yesterday, today, tomorrow, next week. It's got to be the exact same product. Restaurants do not want variations in product. If you want to consistently bring customers back, you need to produce a consistent product.
Yeah.
And so that's where the skill is. It's not, can you make one perfect baguette today? It's, can you make 100 perfect baguettes today and 100 perfect baguettes tomorrow? And whatever you did today doesn't matter tomorrow, because tomorrow is a brand new set of 100 baguettes. And if you mess up that 100 baguettes, that's who you are as a baker that day. You get another chance the next day, and that might work out a little better for you if you didn't do so good today. But the repetition and the consistency is actually the part that I like the most, because it means that you can really have mastery over something. And there aren't a lot of places are like, oh, every day is a different kind of job. And, we do a different thing every day and it never gets boring. And in a bakery, we don't do a different thing every day. We do the same thing every single day. And if you're not ready to show up and do the next thing tomorrow, then you're going to be in a lot of trouble because we're doing it again the next day. So you have to learn to like love that process, because if you don't, then you're just going to get bored or frustrated that you're not getting to, live your whatever creative thing that you thought you were going to get to do in culinary school.
Have you always had that relationship with that process, or has it changed over time?
Since I've been a baker, I think I've learned to enjoy it as I learned what it meant to be a baker. So I think for a long time I wasn't that way, because I did think that chaos was good and it led to opportunity and fun and whatever.
So it's through baking, but even you've basically had that relationship since you started baking to having to do it every single day and be consistent and
Yeah,
go
because I
through the
think in the
method.
beginning I really wanted to be a baker. And in order to be a baker, that's the only, like, it's not going to come right away. And so if that's the identity that I wanted to hold, which was what my original goal was, you have to learn to be okay with that, because if you're not, you're just never going to make it to the point where you want to be.
Got it. And so when I think about a process like that, I think of it almost as like meditative or even devotional.
Mm-hmm.
To do something like that every day with repetition can be.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have that? Does that come into the process of doing it every day for you? Or, I mean, because there are some people who are like, I sit and I meditate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there are those who are like, I run every day. And they may not say that that's a meditation, but it is a meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Have you
Yeah.
ever thought of it that way?
Uh, I think there is an aspect of anything in which you reach flow state where you can enter a thing that resembles a meditative state, because you're so entranced in what the thing whether it's that you're focusing on your breathing, which is like your standard meditation practice, whether it's you're a lot. I do jujitsu. A lot of people call jujitsu like moving meditation, similar thing. But I think at least for me, for baking, I need to look for those moments. So for me, there's moments in the day. One of the things that I like most about being a baker is I'm up very early in the morning. So most days I am awake when the sun rises. So a lot of days I see these really beautiful purple, orange, yellow, streaked skies and all that kind of thing. Especially when I was living in Arizona, it was like beautiful.
Mhm.
And so there are moments, I think, where you can have sort of like a more spiritual connection to it. But also, like, it is a job. So, like, I got to deal with people who I don't like and whose, like, personalities I clash with. And, like, that doesn't feel very meditative. And
Broken
so,
machine.
yeah, sometimes, yeah, like a lot of we are operating on like full tilt. And so, like, there's no, like, oh, we're going to stand around and, like, take in the moment. We're going to stand around and take in the moment together of the bread baking process, and we're gonna, like, that doesn't exist because we're a kitchen. We got to move. So I think you need to find those moments for yourself in this sort of work. But if you look for it, you can find it.
Now, can I ask you, because you said kitchen and, is it quite collaborative? You know, Obviously the process is like, if you don't do one step, you can't get to step 4, right? If you don't do step 1.
Yeah.
But does what you do impact what another person is doing?
Oh,
Are there times where you have a lot of teamwork?
Yeah, we produce, the bakery that I work at is a wholesale bakery. So we produce thousands of loaves a day. And there would be no way that I would be able to do it on my own. And the first thing that you realize when you like open a bakery, I have no plans on opening a food business anytime soon. But, one of the first things you need to do is like hire people who have skills that you don't have, whether that's like, I know how to make bread. I don't know how to file government paperwork. So like I would need to hire a lawyer or a business manager or whatever. And like, it is all teamwork. Nothing like this whole like lone wolf, I'm going to do it on my own bullshit is like, you're not going to get very far.
Yeah.
Like you need a team of people. Education works the exact same way. It does not happen in a vacuum. The more ideas that you have, the more people you have to give ideas, the better execution you can have. Now, there is still a strict hierarchy, right? Like we know who the boss is in the bakery. And if he says that we do it this way, then we're going to do it that way because he's the one who has the skill set. He's the one that has the James Beard Award. He's the one that has, the decades of reading through cookbooks that no one else wants to read through. He's the first among equals, essentially. But like, we are all a part of a team that like never like to say that like I made this bread. I always distribute props because like nothing happens on our own. We all need people to make the best thing that we can make. And that's not just like in the kitchen, right? That's like, I'm not driving the truck that brought the flour to me. I'm not cutting the wheat or milling the wheat. I don't even know how to do that. Like that is not a skill set that I possess. And so I'll have to rely on other people to, bring the thing to life that I want to bring to.
So earlier you were talking about like in the beginning you had some successes and stuff like that, but obviously in bread making, failure is a part of the process. And so how does your work environment and how you approach failure, how do you embrace it or how do you work through it?
I think there are a couple.
Or you can also give an example too of like,
yeah. So my new role at the bakery is that I am the bakery trainer, meaning that any new baker that we get, I have to train them on the station that they're learning first. Or if we have a baker who's already working at the bakery and they want to learn a new station, I'm the one who teaches them the new station. So constantly I am running up against people who are frustrated with their own failure because you are never, we're doing hand skills. We're doing like this. It's not like theoretical abstract work. I need your hands to move in an exact way so that you can produce the thing that I need you to produce. Well, like someone might know in their brain what to do, but they can't get their hands to move in the right way yet. So what I tell to people when we're doing this process is like I like to tell people before they fail that they're going to fail so that they know when they're frustrated this is part of it. You being frustrated is a physical manifestation of your ability to learn. Your frustration is you expanding your in education they call it your zone of proximal development, the zone of the things that you are capable of, and you're growing that zone with each moment of frustration that you. I just tell people, I don't care how frustrated you are. I'm going to force you to continue to fail until you've failed enough that you recognize that failure is an inherent part of the process. And then by doing that, you can release yourself of the stress and anxiety of failure because you know, I'm going to fail.
This is part of it.
Yeah. And I've been successful enough for long enough that I can be like, this is not a accurate depiction of my skill and ability. It's just part of my process in getting better. People who are not as seasoned or experienced, they might, and what I did when I first started baking is I would mess something up and I would get so angry at myself. I would have to, go to the walk-in and like yell or like go do something to like get out of the whatever. But that's not helpful. Like we need to move forward. So like your failure is just enough. Like you can't allow it. You need a second or two to like compose yourself. Of course, that's one thing, whatever. But like we got more dough to mix. We have more bread to shape. We have more stuff to bake. We got to pack this load or else we're going to be here till 10 p.m. at night. No one wants that. So we just have
That's
to
amazing because it seems like the transition over time, your transition from I'm failing to, okay, let's do this. Let's rework this. The problem solving of it happens much quicker. And that's what you're saying is like within the process of what needs to be produced, those things usually over time, they need to happen in a quick manner. Right?
Yeah.
The adjustment needs to be made.
Bakeries are very much about efficiency. And even your failure has to be efficient. Let's say you load up an oven and the bread comes out and there's 30 loaves that are like not good looking, whatever. Yeah. That happens. We can fiddle around with things, but like in another 5 minutes, more bread's coming out. So like we got to deal with this right now and figure out what your solution is going to be. And then we got to keep going because that's how it works. So I think failure is an inherent part of the process. B, because of the repetition that we get, you're going to get a chance to do it right. So like you can't dwell on your current failure, just like you can't dwell on your current success because the next loaf is coming out and that one might be fucked. So it's really about like staying present, knowing, understanding. And I'm very good at this because I have like a 10,000 foot view of my job and about the bakery and sort of like what I'm very good at making like at the moment priority checks, like, oh, actually this is more important than this. But it's just, you have to get used to it. You're going to fail. And if you're not willing to be okay with your failure, then you won't be successful. It's like you just have to learn to push through it and to recognize that it is not a definition or it's not a value statement on you as a person. It's just how this particular thing went.
You're talking about life, huh?
I'm just talking about bread.
I know. So it's so interesting that you said like how your hands move and everything. It's different kinds of bread, right? So like, can you give an example of how you might have to work with the dough differently with one type of bread versus another?
Yeah. So I work mostly with like naturally leavened bread. So like sourdough breads. Sourdough breads generally have higher hydration, which means they have more water in them than like a baguette or like a hoagie roll or something like that. And so because it has more water in it, it's more fluid. It's harder to get tension on it because there's less solid matter, right? It's the more water makes things harder to like rein in. And so in order to do that, you have to learn how to fold dough differently. A baguette might be one shaping method, and that'll end you where you want to get. And a more highly hydrated dough might require some more stitching. It might require some more folds. You might need to tie it in a certain way so that it keeps its shape. You might need the assistance of like a basket to help it keep its shape, as opposed to something that's like less hydrated, that might just keep its shape on like a board. So there is like an understanding of bread, and once you do understand the sort of basic properties of it, you can learn how to manipulate things in a
Cool.
way that gets you the end result that you want.
That's really cool. So I sort of like think of it, and I know you say it's a science, but I think of it how you can have like such simple ingredients and then it's almost like magical, right? It turns
Mhm.
into something completely different that it transforms, really, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I have a question about that, or do you have a comment on what I just said?
Yeah. I mean, that's the beauty of it, right? That's the part that's like the coolest, is that
Yeah.
we take things that are unusable. If you tried to like eat wheat porridge without cooking it, well, I mean, it's like, it's what they used to do thousands of years ago, before the not invention, but the discovery of bread was likely an accident, right? There was probably a group of people in ancient Sumeria who were eating wheat mixed with water in some sort of bowl, and they left it near a heat source, and then they came back multiple hours later, and it kind of got baked into a cake that tasted better and was more nutritionally dense than the slop that they were eating before. And so, like, that's the magic part, is that you can take things that are otherwise not there's very little accessible nutrition. There's no, it's not flavorful or tasty in any way. Your body can't process it, and you like have gastrointestinal problems. Um, you take that, and through some very simple manipulation that is not very hard, that I could teach almost anybody to do, you can turn it from that into something that's like beautiful and tasty and edible and nutritionally dense, and can, people can survive off of. Um, and that's the best part. That's like my favorite part of it, is like thinking about that magic, and that never gets old. That's like the part that I agree with you. I can't tell you what's going on there, but I agree. That's like the best part of it.
What would be your dream way of eating a piece of bread? And I know that there are different kinds. So then, like, what would be like the most satisfying bite to take, and what would it look like for you?
My favorite breads to eat are naturally leavened breads, which is why I make them. So like I
Got it.
prefer sourdough breads. I like to feed people the food that I would want my children to eat. I don't have children, and it's the same food that I would want to eat.
Hmm.
Which is why I don't really like, or at least up until recently, like haven't really done much pastry stuff, or I'm not really interested in like making cakes or cupcakes or anything, because like that's not food that I want to eat, and it's not food that I would feel good, giving my children. Uh, so for me, the best loaf of bite that I could eat is like food that I made, so bread that I made with local ingredients, uh, that are like, high quality butter, high quality honey, whatever. And that's it. Like, I don't, butter, salt, and honey. That's all I would really want on bread.
As
Um,
simple as possible so that you can actually enjoy the bread. Do you buy things locally a lot?
yeah.
Or
Yeah, we eat out almost never. We buy probably, I don't know, over 50% of the food that we eat during the week is from a farmer's market in the city. And that's all like local Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan stuff. I eat the exact same thing every single day for lunch. It never changes. It's always the exact same thing. I like that structure. I like knowing that the food that I have is going to fuel me in a way that makes me feel good, and then I can do my job better, or I could, go work. I could go work out better, or I could be more present with my wife, or like whatever. Like those are, I think your food is your medicine, and that is the thing that dictates a lot about how you feel. And I feel better when I eat food that is close to me, is made by people who care about what they're doing, is created for the betterment of the people who are making it, and not for whatever corporation is buying it or selling it. And my wife and I really try to live our values in that way, which is not always easy, but I just feel better doing it.
it's very interesting. My journey around food and my experience and relationship with food changed very much when I realized that it was your food is your medicine. And from there, I think that, I'm a person who has, maybe for almost 2 years, the past 2 years have only shopped at farmers markets and made everything from there, supplement a little bit, have relationship with the farmers, have conversations with them to understand, their process or what their fields look like, right?
Their
Week by week. And
those people like love, first of all, they love talking about those things. And it gives you like a sense of community. Like we know, Nicole knows the guy who we buy, not who we buy our eggs from, and we buy our vegetables from, and we get our cheese from. Like these people at the farmers market, we're there every week. They know us. Sometimes they'll give us free stuff because we're there all the time, and they're like, "Oh yeah, take a couple more of these," or what. Like it becomes. It's a community model, right? Like there are people who it's like Cheers, a place where everyone knows your name. Like it feels good to connect to people over food. And like, it's an easy way to do it is just to buy your food from the same people over and over again.
What's interesting too, is like when I buy food from the supermarket, I'm just not as engaged in cooking, but when I buy it from a farmer's market, the creativity, the excitement, the wanting to share is it's a whole different thing. Glad that you brought that up.
As much, right? Like if you want to take a crappy tomato from the supermarket and turn it into something good, you have to do more to it than it would require if you just got a good tomato. And you got a good tomato when the tomatoes were in season and when the farmers if you stick to the farmer's market, you're going to get everything at its peak when it tastes best. Right now, it's Concord grape season. You can get some of the best grapes you've ever had in your entire life right now. And then in 3 weeks, you won't be able to get them anymore. And you'll have to learn about. And I don't know, there's something cool about that too. That like.
I like that. I like that it's impermanent. It's not. It's also creation, right? But it's from the planet, right? And so,
we are not above the seasons of the earth, right? Like we are just as tied into them as the food that you consume is. And I don't know, eating in season feels like a way to connect to the earth in a different way than just like eating whatever you want from the supermarket.
Have you, as of late, been able to experiment or try new recipes?
Not in the past few months. Actually, I've been sort of more in this new role of training people. And when we're training people, we're like, training them on the fundamentals, sort of basic things that we do. But in my previous role at this bakery, I was like getting the opportunity to try some new recipes and make up recipes on my own and sort of figure out, there was a little bit of space for that.
So how do you follow your instincts, like when you're experimenting, or instincts at all involved, or is it just skill, or what's the balance between the two?
There's like a baseline of skill that you need to build in order to have the ability to even be creative, because if you can't produce a consistent product based on the fundamentals, right? If I need you to make a regular sourdough bread and you can't make that, then you can't really make the more complicated bread with the harder to manage wheat and the more expensive, product or whatever, right? Like you really need to have that fundamental ability before you can really consistently, and bakeries are all about consistently, be creative. But once I developed those abilities and skills, nothing that like we do is new. The skill, obviously, like we have machinery and we have state-of-the-art equipment and all the whatever things that you need, but like the things that we're doing are the same things that people have been doing for thousands of years. They take water, yeast, flour, and salt, mix them together, and make bread out of it. So if you know how to do that, if you know how to do that well, then you can take those small steps into new areas. Let's remember that nothing that you are doing is new. You might be putting a small new spin on something, but like for me, the humility is in recognizing that you are a link in a long chain, and that's it. There's going to be people after you who are going to think that they're doing crazy new different things, but they're just going to be another link in that chain too. And that's great. I actually view that as like an act of humility or like I take solace in that. Actually, I really enjoy that part of it.
Can see how there would be some solace in that. Like it goes in with expanding the community over time, actually. So it's not just the community presently around you, but the community of people over centuries behind you who have done this practice.
Yeah. And maybe that's especially important to me because of like my Jewish heritage. But like we really look at tradition as like an important aspect of our identity. And so I think I'm sort of like predisposed to taking that viewpoint, maybe. But I don't know.
Then also to think about it, when I called it a trade, right? How many things do we call trades nowadays? One of the oldest trades and crafts, right?
Yeah, it's very, very central to the human experience.
Yeah. You said you do jiu-jitsu. How does that play into to your life?
To me, the way that you do anything is the way that you do everything. And so I just sort of look at jiu-jitsu as this. I see similarities in the things that I do in the bakery and jiu-jitsu all the time. They're both skills that require repetition. They're both dangerous in their own ways to your body. They are identities that I want to hold as an individual. They're things that you have to learn to push through frustration in order to get success. And there is another thing that is like once. Like anything could happen today and I would be calm about it. I've already trained. There's nothing that anybody can do to me today that is going to be worse than a 220-pound guy shoving his elbow into the side of my neck. No one's going to do anything that's going to be more difficult than that for me today.
You know, I felt that way when I used to do hot yoga, right? Now they call it hot yoga. So it's an hour and a half of 100+ degree heat. Mm-hmm. And within the first 15 minutes, you're like, how am I going to survive? Mm-hmm. You push through to an hour and a half. And then afterward, there is nothing that anyone could throw at you that you couldn't handle because you went through that.
Yeah, because like people need hard things to do. And if they don't have hard things to do, they create problems in their life for them to then try to solve so that they can have a hard thing to do.
Do you think it needs to be physical too? Hard things in physicality, right? I don't know. I wonder.
I certainly would think so. I think that your body needs, like a dog or a horse or something, your body needs movement. Like our bodies were created to move. And without, I think of myself as very lucky that like I don't sit behind a desk and at my job most days. I'm on my feet all day. I'm moving around. I'm not looking at a screen that's a certain, distance away from my eyes so that so I am very grateful that I have a job that is like constantly using my body. I don't think I would have been as successful if that wasn't the case. But yeah, I think whatever your practice is, you need to do something hard. If I had a really difficult conversation with my father today, and I knew I didn't want to have this conversation, and I pushed through and we had the conversation and we got the whatever, regardless of how that conversation went, if I felt like I did something that was hard for me to do, I imagine I would feel a similar sense of satisfaction as I do when I do a hard jiu-jitsu session. It's missing that physical aspect, so I might also need to go do something physical in order to get that part out. But I think the satisfaction is in doing the hard thing, not necessarily in the hard thing being physical.
Actually doing the work, as opposed to like pushing things aside and coasting through, to actually get into the nitty-gritty of what it takes to push through, whatever it is, that hard thing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times that manifests itself in a physical thing, because for a lot of people, it's hot yoga or jiu-jitsu or running or whatever that thing is. And that's great. And I think that's also, but...
I guess it could also be sitting for 2 hours in meditation.
Yeah. I told myself...
21 days silence.
Oh, have you done silent retreats before?
Oh, my best friend has done it. I have signed up twice. I never went, not yet.
Yeah. I have a buddy who like does long silent retreats, which is wild because he's like the most talkative person I know. But for me, just to go back to jiu-jitsu, that physical, I spent a lot of my 20s in like various forms of depression. And so by the time I started jiu-jitsu in my early 30s, I just assumed that depression, Ted, was like how my life was going to be because that's just how I thought my life was going to be. Because my life had been that way all the way up until then, and I just assumed that's how it was going to be. But because I did something that was not only hard, but like physically intense, jujitsu is someone trying to fake murder you, and you have to try to stop them from fake murdering you. That like exhaustion that sort of like was released out of me allowed me the space, the mental space to be able to deal with things that I wasn't able to deal with because I just had all that shit inside of me. And it wasn't until I was able to release it physically that I was able to like see a path forward mentally. So I definitely think that they're like connected to each other and that there is a need for physicalness and physicality in everybody's life. And I actually think you can't deal with your mental health until you deal with your physical health. I know that's like that is not necessarily a popular thought, but like if you are experiencing mental unwellness and you are physically inactive and you are not taking care of your body and you're not eating well, you're not connecting with people, you're not, all those things, you have to deal with your physical health. You'll never catch up.
I can see what you're saying, particularly. I have in my relationship with exercise, I find that movement, if you want movement in things that really matter to you, that you might not have been able to move towards or move on, usually physical movement helps create movement in other areas. So how you do one thing is how you do everything. And I think it's really interesting, though, also that you talk about the community of baking bread, right? Whether it's past, present, all of that. There's also that community in jiu-jitsu as well. Like you are working with people, you are fighting with them, you are sparring, you have relationships with them, you clean the space together. And also it's in like an ancient, right? Isn't it? It's like a very old, not old, but yes, it's very old.
Developed by samurais for when they lose their weapons in battle.
Tradition.
Yeah, I mean you're 100% right. And for a lot of people, that's why they stay in jiu-jitsu is because like they've developed friends in a community. Your body, for a lot of people, your body gives out on you before you want it to, or before you're ready for it to. And a lot of people continue to train and injure themselves physically because they love the community. Some people come to class and they don't really spar. They don't really train super hard because that's not why they're there. People come for different reasons and they're all valid. Some people might get better at jiu-jitsu at other people based on their goals. But, people come for lots of different reasons and you need all of them to be successful.
And I'm so grateful. I'm so happy that we had this conversation and that you took the time out with me.
Yeah, of course.
It's really cool to hear about your perspective. And it's also very interesting, I think, for people to look at how doing the same action every single day can basically transform your life and transform the way you can view things. And can make all the difference, right? To have like magic in the ordinary and magic in the discipline the discipline, there's still chaos in the order, right? You expressed chaos in the order a bit, or unexpectedness in the order as well. So I don't know. Did you mean to
there's
say
like
that?
You did mention something that clicked a thing, which is that there's this term called radical amazement, which was coined by this 19th or 20th century rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. And it's like that there is godliness in all things, no matter how small or big. And so like you look at the beautiful mountain range, oh my God, it's so beautiful. That's easy. Something like that conjures awe really easily. But if you like look at the tip of a pencil, that's just the tip of a pencil. But like, no, his thought is that in all of those things, whether it's the big mountain range or the tiny pencil tip, that there is godliness. And that is our job as people to find that godliness in everything. And while I don't necessarily subscribe to all of his theological principles, the idea that like in every small bit there is worthiness is like I don't know, it's like a thing to stretch towards, I think.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that.
I love you. No problem.
I love you too, Ted. It was wonderful. My gosh, Ted. Great. Well, how do I pause this? I'm just